With the latest agriculture news from across the state and nation, it's time for the AgNet News Hour from AgNet West. Here's your host, Sabrina Halvorson.
Good morning, and thanks for joining us this morning on the AgNet News Hour. I am Sabrina Halvorson, joined by Lorrie Boyer. Now, Lorrie was telling me off mic as we get right into it this morning about an interesting story she was reading about our squirrels in California. Lorrie, what's going on?
Yeah, I was scrolling through just some news headlines on my MSN, so I'll credit them because that's where this information is coming from. And I don't have a lot of details, nor did I look up a whole lot of details. So here's what I found very interesting, and I don't know why, because I guess you and I are squirrely sometimes. Squirrels are becoming carnivorous. And by that, I mean they're starting to eat other animals. Typically, they eat nuts, right? Typically, they eat some of the vegetative sources that are around them. But they have been found to be hunting. This is what's even stranger: hunting, killing, and eating voles. VOLE. I know what those are. I haven't talked about those for a long time, but voles are like, they look like little mice, I guess, but little creatures. And the reason researchers are calling them, let's see if I can say this word, opportunistic omnivore, because squirrels are more flexible in their diets than researchers realize. So it took researchers this long, I guess, to figure out that
that they can eat and digest actual meat instead of just plant proteins and things.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe I watch a little bit too much sci-fi lately.
Yes.
So.
I can't even tell you. I'm fascinated and yet disturbed by this. The thought of squirrels heading out and, hunting down other animals and ripping into them. And yes, I like I said, fascinated and slightly disturbed. It's a little troubling.
It is. And I would say that squirrels, I'm going to venture to just guess squirrels are probably one of the most known animals. Everybody knows what a squirrel is, no matter where you live, because they're all over. They're in rural areas. They're in all different geographic locations across the country. They're in urban areas. They're right outside your door. So how many of us associate squirrels with eating another animal? That is disturbing.
Right. It's not something, and maybe, like you said, maybe I watch too much sci-fi and a little bit of horror. So all I can imagine is now the squirrels are plotting their takeover. You know?
It sounds like the theme of your next book.
It does. Yes, it does.
Now, I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say I can do something with that.
How widespread this behavior is, we don't know, but we're seeing this in California right now. So I'll be interested to see if researchers in other states are seeing the same type of behavior. But it is also interesting that researchers are really paying attention to this and the fact that it made national news.
That is actually very interesting. And it brings to mind some, more serious questions, although albeit not too serious. But, are we witnessing evolution in the squirrels? Whereas, like you said, we've always thought of squirrels as being purely vegetarian with eating nuts. But are we witnessing, in real time, the evolution of a species?
Yeah, I would guess so. It would make sense to me. We're seeing all kinds of different weird things here as our country changes, as the climate changes and all this stuff. So I guess it would make sense that this would evolve into carnivorous animals.
Gosh, I don't like the sound of that a bit.
I don't either.
All right, so we have kind of a fun segment. So, with it being the start of Christmas week, so what we're going to do is we're going to take our break a little bit early, and then we're going to come back. We're going to switch topics with, we're going to get off the squirrels, although, as Lorrie mentioned, we are a little bit squirrely this morning. But this is the AgNet News Hour. We will be right back. Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. I am Sabrina Halvorson, here with Lorrie Boyer.
Good morning.
So it is the kickoff to Christmas week, and I know you and I both really enjoy Christmas, and so I thought that maybe we'd spend a couple of minutes just talking about Christmas, and I brought up some Christmas traditions from around the world that are rooted in agriculture. And, I've done a couple of stories on this in the past, looking at how agriculture has been embedded into our Christmas traditions. If looking at things that we do, not necessarily from a religious standpoint, although there were some traditions that I found that kind of combined the religious celebration of Christmas with some agriculture. One of them is in Slavic traditions, they will place straw or hay underneath their tablecloth at Christmas Eve for Christmas Eve dinner. Like in Poland, Ukraine, Lithuania, places like that. This straw is supposed to represent the manger where Jesus was born, but also it represents the agricultural roots of their community. And it wishes for, it's supposed to bring about abundant crops and fertility in the fields for the coming year. And I thought that was really an interesting
Wow.
tradition.
I had no idea.
Yeah. I like to see how agriculture is so often put into our lives, maybe in ways even people who are not involved in agriculture are taking part in traditions like this without necessarily knowing their roots. But really, it's all a celebration of ag. Not to say that Christmas is a celebration of ag. Obviously, there are religious reasons for Christmas, but I love seeing that we celebrate agriculture within it.
Well, Jesus was born in a barn, so he was born around agricultural products and livestock. So there
True.
you go.
So, okay, have you ever heard the song that starts off, "Here we go a wassailing among the leaves so green"?
I have, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I even will sing that song in my head, and I've never known what wassailing means. And I don't know why I never bothered to look it up before, but I've always been very curious what the heck is wassailing. So apparently, wassailing is in parts of England during the 12 days of Christmas. People gather in apple orchards to wassail the trees. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but they sing, chant, and sometimes pour cider onto the roots, making noise to ward off evil spirits. And so the ritual is to ensure a healthy apple crop and a bountiful harvest in the coming year.
Wow. I'm learning all kinds of stuff from you this morning. I just thought it was some sort of like a waltz,
Yeah,
like
I
a
don't know.
dance. Yeah.
I always thought it meant like you're going Christmas caroling. Maybe it was
Hmm.
something strange, but no, it's actually this tradition for the almond orchards where you're, you know, supplying, healthy, I don't know, is cider healthy for apples? That's almost feels strange. But
But it
what's the
does
word?
make sense because we
Yeah.
call it wassail. You want a cup
Yeah.
of wassail? Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. So here we go, a wassailing. Yeah, it's all about celebrating the apple orchards and ensuring a healthy apple crop for the coming year. Here in the U.S., our traditions aren't quite as ag based in a lot of them. But if you think about, I like our decorations this year. I dehydrated orange slices and strung them up and hung them around the house in different places. Honestly, it was something I saw online. I thought, wow, that's really beautiful. I'm going to do that this year. Normally, I go way overboard on the Christmas decorations, but this year it's all just natural pine that I collected from outside
Neat.
and
Uh-huh.
dehydrated orange slices. And that's I don't know if it's always been very popular. I know that it was a very long time ago when that's what people had to decorate, but I
Hmm.
know that this year it seems like online everybody's doing it. So I have to say I'm a follower on that one. But it is really beautiful. And I love the idea of bringing agriculture into my home during the holiday season.
Right, right. Wow, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I have seen that too. Some dehydrated oranges made into like garlands,
Hmm.
or people make them into coasters with that clear hypoxy stuff. I have seen a few of those things too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've always like have seen people that will string up cranberries to
Yeah,
wrap around the tree. I have never done that. Have you ever done that? Cranberries or maybe popcorn?
I have. Yeah, a long time ago. Yeah.
It seems like that would be so tedious. How do you do that?
With a needle and thick thread. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it is tedious, but I guess it's one of those traditions you do with your family and have fun doing it.
Yeah.
Throw
So
popcorn at each other.
that's true. I would prefer I love popcorn. I would just prefer to eat the popcorn. So what are some agriculture or not agriculture, but I'm curious, Lori, what are some things that you really love about this season?
Well, you bring to the table some good information, some facts. I was just going to bring to the table that it is speculated that Rudolph has a red nose because he probably had a parasitic infection in his respiratory system. That's what I got for you.
Okay, so I know a few things about reindeer, and believe it or not, it's one of my weird things. But reindeer actually can get red noses in the winter. It's the body's natural defense system against freezing. So when it gets very cold,
Mm.
they will like pump extra blood to their nose, and they've got their blood vessels kind of close to the surface. And so they will appear more red, kind of like how we will get a red nose if we're
Hmm.
cold or whatever. Same thing for reindeer. And they can actually get, quote unquote, a red nose from that too.
Or they have a parasitic infection.
Right.
One of
Or
those
they have a
things.
parasitic infection. Also, Santa's reindeers would have been female, because all reindeer shed their antlers. Male reindeer shed their antlers earlier in the season. So by the time Christmas comes around,
Oh,
they have no antlers. And so since all of Santa's reindeer have antlers, that means they're female.
that actually makes sense. I think I kind of knew something along those lines. Yeah,
Hmm.
I remember I've done a few interviews on reindeer in the past too. Yeah, because they're
Yeah,
very hardy animals, very
they are.
overall easy keepers. I understand they're kind of docile and slow and don't get too worked up and but very hardy. They winter well, they go through the summer well.
Yeah. So I have a secret desire. Maybe it's not secret. I talk about it all the time. Uh, I really want to be a Christmas tree farmer.
Oh,
I
well, there
I
you
feel
go.
like that should be my life. I should be a Christmas tree grower. I would probably be horrible at it, but I don't know. It just seems like I'm really drawn to. I love the idea of having a Christmas tree farm.
Yeah, maybe you can plant some in your backyard.
Maybe. I'm not great at growing things that take a long time.
Then I'm not sure this would work out for you.
No, no, probably not. I just I just had on the show in my segment
Ah,
a few days back, an expert from North Carolina on Christmas trees. North Carolina is one of the main
mm,
states
I did
where
know
we
that.
grow Christmas trees in the nation. And he was talking about the detail and the work that goes into it. You know, they spend the first 2 years of their lives in the nursery, and then they're able to be transplanted out or put in pots outside, and then bigger and bigger pots until they're transplanted into the ground. And by the time we get the Christmas tree, if you want a tree that's like 6 feet tall, well, that tree is probably 8 years old. So it's taken.
Oh,
They grow about a foot a year or 2 feet a year. So it's a long process. It takes dedication.
wow.
All right. So with that, it is time for us to take a break. Now, before we head to the break, I just want to let our listeners know that since it is Christmas week, you and I are going to be taking some time with our families. So over the next few days, they will be hearing some of our best of episodes. But we will be coming back live next Monday, and we just hope that everybody has a fantastic Christmas.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. She's Lorrie Boyer, and we'll be right back. This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. Would you explain a little bit better what fulvic acid is?
Yeah, sure. So when you talk about the humates and humic acid family, you actually have a smaller group, which is the fulvic acids, and they're soluble at all pH. The medium weight molecules are the humic acids, and they're only alkaline soluble. And those are important because let's say you're doing a spray mix and you're mixing something that's somewhat acidic. When you use a humic acid product, that product by definition will gel. It will form precipitate and won't stay soluble. So they can plug emitters and it is problematic for the applicator. Whereas fulvic acid is soluble at all pH. It's smaller, it's still permeable, and it really makes it a phenomenal foliar applied product. And so for farmers, having access to that ingredient as a standalone ingredient is a benefit because it allows them to use these sprays that are more acidic and not have to worry about gelling and plugging emitters.
And from what I understand, fulvic acid is also being explored for its role in human health. And I'm just curious, how does this intersect with agricultural applications, if at all?
That's the interesting thing about fulvic acid is it's a really great chelating and complexing agent. Nutrients will attach to fulvic acid and it will aid in absorption. So fulvic acid is used in some very unrelated industries such as cosmetics and makeup. So when you look on the label and it says minerals, sometimes that's actually fulvic acid. And what they're trying to do is increase the absorption of those components through the cell membrane. Now, whether it's a plant cell or a human cell, the function is the same, and they're trying to increase absorption. And it's more of a nutritive delivery than it is anything. And that's what we're trying to change the rules for is currently there is allowances for nutritional chemicals that facilitate a nutrient delivery. And it's just not broadly accepted in plants, but we can make those claims in human cells. So same application, but different mechanisms.
To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com.
Hello, everyone. I'm Lorrie Boyer,
And I'm Sabrina Halvorson, and we're the hosts of the AgNet News Hour.
and we want to take this opportunity to wish you and your family a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Lorrie Boyer.
Today, I visit with Tracy Edgar. She is the owner of a consulting firm called Bright Changes Consulting, where she specializes in agriculture. Tracy, tell me more about yourself and your consulting firm.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today. I really am passionate about leadership development as well as helping people just become better versions of themselves. So, with about 20 years of experience in academics, I worked at Purdue University and taught several courses there. It's where I finished my PhD in leadership development. I moved into the agriculture industry and started working for some different companies in learning and development, and really worked with leaders and helping them figure out how can they take their people from where they are today to where they really need them to be able to be the most productive employees and the best part of those teams. So I've been doing that for several years, and then working in my own consulting business on the side, as an executive coach as well, and then facilitation, as well as just working with leaders across the agriculture industry in different facets of growth and development.
Very good. All right. What made you decide this is the career path for you?
I get asked that question quite often, and I think it began, as my roots started in the FFA organization. I really found this love for leadership development and this passion for wanting to be around people and developing people. And then through my tenure at different universities and working with different professors in leadership development, I really honed in on my true passion in that area. And then, of course, agriculture is something that has always been part of my family, and just something that I really enjoy being part of that industry. So I knew I wanted to combine those two things, and this is where I've ended up. And it has been a glorious ride. I am blessed and grateful for all of the people who have impacted me, and likewise. And that's what I hope to do every day, is have that same kind of impact on others.
Tracy, I can certainly identify with that. I knew I wanted to be in broadcast and print media, and I love agriculture. So I combined my career paths just like you did. So I certainly relate to how you chose this career path. Let's continue our conversation here today. As we turn now and talk about culture, Tracy, what are some things that create a success in a company when it comes to culture, or maybe things that create a negative environment?
I love the concept of culture, because undoubtedly it starts with that true shared belief and those values. And as I told you earlier, how much I really appreciate people development. That's the core of how people show up every day to work. And having some inside ag industry kind of experience, I've worked very diligently in helping to develop culture at a couple of different organizations. And what I really do believe is that the culture is really the personality of that organization. What works and what doesn't work, that's a very good question. I think it's going to be different for every organization or every firm that we ask that question to. But I think most importantly is that when employee goals and needs align with that company set of goals, that's when employees are really likely to begin to love their job and love the people that they work with. And what happens when we have employees who love their jobs? We get higher motivation, increased performance, all of the things that really can help those companies become stronger in their output. And so it all starts with that culture and with the employee.
So, as a consultant, where do you begin with this process when you're trying to help an operation improve their culture or find a culture that works best for them?
I think for me, I like to have a really firm background on what has happened, what is happening. And so, whether that's qualitative face to face interviews with not only leadership, but employees across all facets of the organization, I think that's something that's really important. Some companies like to do pulse surveys, which I think are greatly helpful in figuring out where that employee uh, feels, at the moment, if a big merge had just happened, if a company had acquired, or changes of any kind have taken place. Those pulse surveys provide some really detailed information on employee satisfaction. And so having an opportunity to be able to see that output and to see what those employees have indicated is the place that I truly like to begin. That's where I can start building the foundation and really start identifying what pieces are needed to be able to develop those solutions. And then we work together with those organizations and do a plan, and hopefully it's multiple opportunities to be able to be in front of either decision makers, or being able to put that plan together so that they can utilize that in-house to be able to grow that employee satisfaction opportunity.
Tracy, what exactly is a pulse survey?
Perfect question. A pulse survey is much shorter than a true engagement survey. Typically, pulse surveys are only gauging um, an immediate need. Like I mentioned before, as we've seen in agriculture, lots of companies are coming together. We're merging some different kinds of organizations. And when you begin to merge cultures from 2 or 3 or 4 different companies, of course, things begin to get a little muddy because everybody's culture is very different. So those pulse surveys just give opportunities for employees to be able to know, um, hey, look, do we need to increase our communication? Do employees feel like they're not getting any information about what's happening or what's forthcoming? Why are decisions being made now without input from employees? Those kinds of details, quick, swift kinds of things that can really improve employee sentiment very quickly, if they're addressed promptly.
Say you identify a business, they need help. They're having a negative culture, I guess, if you will, for whatever the reason may be. How do you step in? What are some of the starting steps that you suggest after the survey, obviously? What do you suggest from there?
Yeah, and so I think that's a really good place to begin, is looking at those survey results and then trying to collaborate with leadership to be able to determine, why would employees have those specific sentiments, and maybe helping them to draw that dotted line from the employee to what was reported on those pulse surveys to really be able to figure out where employees are today and why is it that they have the feelings that they do. Then I even take it down a notch. And so not only starting at that top leadership level, but let's move down into that middle leadership level. Maybe it's a communication issue that, is that the actual problems or solutions or obstacles, maybe it's not being transparent from top to bottom and it's getting stuck in that middle phase. And so having that opportunity to really work at different levels and different stages of the organization gives me that opportunity to make sure everyone is on the same page with not only the messaging, but also with what the problem and solution could typically be.
Tracy Egger, owner of Bright Changes Consulting, specializing in agricultural operations. My guest here today. Will take a break and be right back. I'm Lorrie Boyer. Welcome back as I continue my visit here today with Tracy Egger. She is owner of Bright Changes Consulting, where she specializes in working with agricultural companies. Tracy, say a company puts together a plan, decides to implement a plan. How do you ensure, or how do you suggest the company ensures that it stays on track with that plan?
Staying on track is something that's incredibly important. And I think first and foremost, broad spectrum here. I think with any engagement survey or pulse survey, one of the most important things to do is to truly identify what those obstacles and problems were that were stated in those surveys, and making sure that as leadership, that you're able to communicate to the employees that, yes, I see that we have this distinct problem, and then putting together those steps. How are we going to address those specific issues? And then once that plan is derived on how to address the issues, then really putting those plans and those motions into place. So those long-term plans, and maybe even writing it into the goals for the organization. A lot of companies will have not only organizational goals, but they'll have functional goals and then specific employee goals. So making sure that those solutions are written into the goals from top to bottom. That's a good way to really practice and making sure that those specific issues are being looked at from beginning to end, and making sure that they're continuing to stay at the top of minds for that leadership team, so that employees know that they're doing their best to really try to bring the best for that employee.
Tracy, as we know, there is a lot of turnover, especially in the agriculture industry. So say you get someone new in there, or you hire a new leader or promote a new leader. How do you acclimate them into the goals and strategy of what the company is trying to achieve as far as their culture?
That's a pretty common thing that happens within our industry, obviously. And so we do have a lot of leaders that tend to move in and out of organizations or into different roles. And in that specific instance, I think that's when that one-on-one coaching really becomes very useful. Utilizing me as a resource to be able to know what information has been gathered previously, what the plan was. And then moving forward, does this new leader have a specific plan in mind, or maybe they want to continue on the same path? Sometimes they want to ditch the plan and start something new. And I think it's okay as long as the specific problem, the specific obstacle is being addressed. Different plans can change. Company goals change all of the time. And how we derive at those specific situations and goals really is oftentimes, month to month or quarter to quarter. And knowing that things change, it's okay to make that, as long as there is a plan to be able to see the end point.
Tracy, what else would you like to mention here today?
I appreciate it so much. And like I said, culture is so important to me. The one thing I think I would leave on is that just reminding our industry that a strong culture means people are the priority. It's not always the output or the revenue that particular organization generates. And when we can increase engagement of our employees, there's going to be better business outcomes. Even a recent Gallup employee engagement tracking survey showed that only 33% of our employees in the United States are actively engaged with their job. So what does that mean? That means we have a lot of work to do to be able to ensure that our employees are truly feeling like they are the priority.
Tracy Egger, owner of Bright Changes Consulting. You can find her on LinkedIn. I'm Lorrie Boyer, and we're back with Sabrina Halvorson right after this.
This segment is brought to you by Live Earth Products. To get to know a little more about Live Earth Products, we're talking on the phone today with Vice President Russell Taylor. Would you explain a little bit better what fulvic acid is?
Yeah, sure. So when you talk about the humates and humic acid family, you actually have a smaller group, which is the fulvic acids, and they're soluble at all pH. The medium weight molecules are the humic acids, and they're only alkaline soluble. And those are important because let's say you're doing a spray mix and you're mixing something that's somewhat acidic. When you use a humic acid product, that product by definition will gel. It will form precipitate and won't stay soluble. So they can plug emitters, and it is problematic for the applicator. Whereas fulvic acid is soluble at all pH. It's smaller, it's still permeable, and it really makes it a phenomenal foliar applied product. And so for farmers, having access to that ingredient as a standalone ingredient is a benefit, because it allows them to use these sprays that are more acidic and not have to worry about gelling and plugging emitters.
And from what I understand, fulvic acid is also being explored for its role in human health. And I'm just curious, how does this intersect with agricultural applications, if at all?
That's the interesting thing about fulvic acid, is it's a really great chelating and complexing agent. Nutrients will attach to fulvic acid and it will aid in absorption. So fulvic acid is used in some very unrelated industries such as cosmetics and makeup. So when you look on the label and it says minerals, sometimes that's actually fulvic acid. And what they're trying to do is increase the absorption of those components through the cell membrane. Now, whether it's a plant cell or a human cell, the function is the same, and they're trying to increase absorption. And it's more of a nutritive delivery than it is anything. And that's what we're trying to change the rules for. Is currently there is allowances for nutritional chemicals that facilitate a nutrient delivery, and it's just not broadly accepted in plants, but we can make those claims in human cells. So same application, but different mechanisms.
To get to know more about Live Earth products, you can visit them online at liveearth.com. That is spelled LIVEARTH.com.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
For this segment, we're going to talk about Christmas trees, specifically the Christmas tree industry here in the U.S. We have a guest joining us on the phone. And Justin, to get us started off, would you please go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners?
My name is Justin Whitehill, and I'm an assistant professor at NC State University in the College of Natural Resources and Department of Forestry and Environmental Resources, and I'm the director of the Christmas Tree Genetics Program.
We wanted to talk about Christmas trees. We are about halfway through, a little more than halfway through December, so a lot of people do already have their Christmas trees up. But I just wanted to find out a little bit more about the Christmas tree industry in the U.S. And of course, we're talking about real Christmas trees grown by our Christmas tree farmers here around the nation. It's quite an industry. Would you just start us out telling us a little bit about Christmas trees themselves?
Yeah, so Christmas trees runs the gamut of what we call the conifers, anything that is considered an evergreen with long greenery during the winter months. And so pines, spruces, and firs are the major species. But because of that and the interest in the Christmas tree industry, we have growers spread across the United States in every state, really. But the major production regions occur in Oregon State, North Carolina, and Michigan. And by and large, we have anywhere between probably close to 15,000 Christmas tree growers scattered across the United States. And the industry estimated has been valued at somewhere around $2.5 billion is the amount of funds that are provided annually or rated annually through the U.S. Christmas tree industry.
So for our Christmas tree growers around the nation, what would you say are some of the biggest issues facing them?
I think everything at the moment is being viewed through the lens of climate change, of course. I think that whether our growers in some parts of the country realize it or not, that there are, of course, things happening in the environment that are maybe making growing Christmas trees a little more challenging than what it has been in the past. And with climate change, of course, we're looking at how much stress the trees are basically accumulating. And as I mentioned, the trees and species that are grown around the United States really vary by region. And it really depends on where we're located, but by and large, increasing temperatures, we're seeing more drought occurring for longer periods of time. And that drought is really putting a little bit more stress on the Christmas trees, which makes them a little more susceptible to either diseases or pests that maybe are kept at bay under normal conditions, whatever we want to consider normal conditions. And when the stress kind of accumulates and temperatures change, that's when those things start to ramp up, and that causes more challenges for our growers.
So yeah, you mentioned it a bit, but with changes in temperatures, also with seeing differences in water, like you said, we are seeing more drought areas also. Does that change pest and disease pressures for the tree industries in different areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in North Carolina, our industry has been around for quite a while, and we've had extension specialists and university faculty working with our growers hand in hand for the last 40 plus years. And so we've been really closely monitoring some of those changes and challenges, and that can be said for other states as well, like Michigan, even in the New England area, Connecticut, and all the way in the Pacific Northwest. And we know what is happening in our states and in our areas, and we've been really working with our growers to address some of these challenges. But I think it's some of those states that are in the in-between areas that maybe don't have as large of a Christmas tree industry, that are caught on the margins. I'm a little worried about how those growers are going to be dealing with some of the challenges they're facing, because of course there's a lot of crosstalk between the industry no matter where you're located, and our growers in North Carolina work with growers around the country, and the same can be said for other states. And so we're really wondering, what are those challenges other states are beginning to face? And is there anything we can do to help? And is there anything that maybe their local land grant institutions should be aware of to start paying attention to some diseases or pest dynamics that may be changing in the face of accelerated climate change that we need to be aware of and get in front of?
And then, of course, with you being in North Carolina, had just some devastating consequences from the hurricane season this year. Has that really affected the Christmas trees?
By and large, Hurricane Helene at the moment really did not have a significant impact on the number of trees and the tree quality or anything like that this year. The majority of the impact of Helene was in those valleys. We grow our Christmas trees in North Carolina, the Fraser fir primarily on the side of mountains. And so they're all pretty up high in elevation as well, usually around 3,000 feet and above. And we do that in part to manage some diseases that, like water, there's a disease, the root rot pathogen, that is causing a lot of challenges for Christmas trees in North Carolina. And so one way to manage that is to control where the water is flowing. And so by and large, our trees are pretty well protected in that realm. There were a few landslides here and there that did impact some trees, but the big majority of the impact from Helene was really on the folks that live closer to water sources and creeks. Those riverbanks and creek beds over flooded really high. I don't even have a number in about a 24-hour period. And so people that had their Christmas tree nursery operations or seedling production areas or homes or equipment in those valleys and between the mountains, those are the folks that were really impacted. And it's anywhere between $40 to $125 million in damage is what we estimate the industry suffered here. But again, that was mainly through the equipment and not as much the commodity itself.
Okay. But either way, commitment or equipment or commodity, that's still a significant impact on growers there, isn't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I don't want to downplay the amount of damage and challenges that we're facing. I think most in North Carolina, we have about 940 Christmas tree growers, and 6 to 8 of those growers suffered significant losses, somewhere in the $30 to $40 million range. And so the rest of that damage was spread across the rest of our grower community, which is still a lot and a big impact. But those few growers that were really in the path of the storm and the floods are the ones that are really suffering. And so I think, yeah, I wanted to get it out there. And I think our grower community too wanted to make sure that folks are aware that by and large, the industry is extremely resilient, despite the setbacks we had and that smaller group of individuals that were significantly impacted. Our communities and growers came together in the western part of the state in the weeks following Helene, and were able to rebuild roads with the Department of Transportation and really get access to those trees. And really the industry, at least in North Carolina, has been a bright spot for the Western North Carolina this year. We didn't get our leafer season, we call it. So the folks that usually come to visit our state and the Blue Ridge Parkway to visit and see the fall colors changing, that didn't happen this year, which is a huge source of income for Western North Carolina. And so the Christmas tree harvest this year has been looked at as for bringing some of that economic revenue back into the state and that part of the rural counties in that part of the state.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue talking about the Christmas tree industry here in the U.S. This is the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson, and we'll be right back.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. Here's Sabrina Halvorson.
Welcome back to the AgNet News Hour. We are talking with Justin Whitehill about the United States Christmas tree industry. As a consumer, we tend to think about Christmas trees once a year or at one season in the year, but obviously growers are growing year round. What are some things that you think the industry kind of wishes consumers understood about what it takes to grow Christmas trees?
I think the biggest thing is just the amount of time that goes into and preparing Christmas trees for families to enjoy during the holidays. It's really a long process, and it takes a lot of commitment and knowledge and hard work to get to where the growers get to every year. And just the life of a Christmas tree starts out as a small seed. That seed is typically sown in a greenhouse and will stay in that greenhouse for 1 to 2 years. When it gets big enough to be transplanted into a little bit bigger plot and moved outside, it could spend another year or two in that kind of bigger pot. We call that the transplant stage. And so you're already between 2 to 4 years before it even gets to the field. Once those transplants are ready, about a foot a foot or so in size. They're then transplanted out into the field where they'll be located at Christmas tree plantations around the US. And so once they get to the field, we average on about 1 foot of growth per year. Once they reach the field, if you want a 6 to 8 foot tall tree, we're talking anywhere between 6 to 8 years of growth. And that's on top of the 2 to 4 years that we've already had happening in the greenhouse and in the transplant bed. So it's a long-term investment that our growers are really committed to this crop and this industry. And I think it's important that folks realize that we can't just develop trees or grow a tree within a year. We have to plan for 10 years down the road what our crop is going to look like. And at an event like Helene, just to bring it back to that, we don't know what the long-term effects of Helene are going to be, but we are aware that there probably are going to be some long-term effects. And that's where replanting is, and identifying trees that may be killed in the coming years are going to be very important because of the timeframes involved in growing the crop every year.
When you're looking at a crop that you're planting today and probably won't be sold for another 8 to 10 years, there are so many things that could happen in those 8 to 10 years to really damage the crop that sometimes a hurricane growers have no power over.
No, absolutely. That's where these kind of once in a lifetime events, we hope they're once in a lifetime events, are really unpredictable. And when they happen, we're really concerned about what kind of impact they're going to have long term. And I think, again, our growers and the trees, by and large, we've seen are in pretty good position. But that's where we have these programs in our research and others that we work with are really trying to address some of these threats from not only climate change, but some of these pests and pathogens that do have such an impact, especially the root rot pathogen. You can have a tree for 6, 7, 8 years looking great, and then the year it's ready to harvest, you'll suddenly have a mortality event and you'll lose that crop. And that's a sort of a devastating thing to happen when you've invested so much time and energy to getting it to that point, and then you just lose it. And that happens. So.
All right. So all the more reason for us as consumers to really appreciate that Christmas tree that we get each year from our Christmas tree growers.
I think so, of course. I think the growers do a great job. So always have to support our growers.
All right. Any final thoughts that you have for our listeners?
I think just share that Christmas trees they're an interesting commodity, a unique commodity, and Christmas trees are biodegradable. They can be recycled if you get a Christmas tree, and there's a lot of debate about the carbon footprint, but that's something that our research and our colleagues are working on. But we know that the carbon footprint of a locally sourced and locally purchased Christmas tree is much better than that of an artificial tree. You'd have to use your artificial tree for 20 plus years to get an equivalent carbon footprint. And so if you do purchase a real tree and support our growers, please make sure that you're recycling it. And once those trees are recycled, they can be used in parks for mulching, or sunk into the bed of lakes for fish habitat, or even used in dune restoration. So I think it's a great thing to help our growers with.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today, Justin. That is our show for today. This has been the AgNet News Hour. I'm Sabrina Halvorson. On behalf of Lorrie Boyer and myself, thank you for tuning in.
To get more information on the topics you heard today, visit AgNet West at agnetwest.com. You can also stay connected by following us on our social media at AgNet West on Facebook, Instagram, and X. Also look for Sabrina Halvorson on Facebook, and be sure to subscribe to our podcast by searching for AgNet West on your podcast app. Thank you for listening.